I'll use the back saw and the chisel to cut it and split it.
Be careful that you don't obliterate the knife edge on the outside shoulder when you're doing this sawing. Ah,
Hoi presto, as they say.
good move.
So that'll be good enough for me. Good enough for you.
Yeah, good enough.
And now we start to come to draw boring. Is that right, John?
That's right.
Question, as the tenon dries, will it shrink or will it become looser or more tight?
It will never become loose because we're going to draw bore it.
Also,
Other than the pins?
Also, you remember the first member we made in this stool were the rails and the stretchers, and the first thing we did then was rough out the tenons. Those tenons are at the end grain, which loses moisture 12 times faster than any side grain, and those pieces are 5/16 of an inch thick, which means they're losing the moisture quicker. And though the middle of a stretcher or a rail may have moisture, those tenons have gotten much drier. And then we've got, as Peter says, a lot of play to go on from there. But that's why we do this order, which maybe you'd say, well, we do the legs first and blah, blah, blah. No. Tenons first, let them dry. Rough them.
So now I've inserted the tenon in the mortise. The mortise, you remember, has the holes for the pins. I'm going to take a very fine awl and scribe a mark that is really the half of that hole towards the mortise buttment, John calls it. And those marks are here and here on that tenon. And now I'm going to bore my hole. I'm going to move it over a little bit, closer to the shoulder, to create that intentional offset.
How much is the offset?
We knew you'd ask. We knew you'd ask.
Jay, when did you call us to do this show? It was almost a year ago. And ever since then, John and I have been saying, they're going to ask how much is that offset. And I kept saying, I don't know how much it is. It's a little bit. John kept saying, they're going to ask how much. And I said, I can't tell you. I don't know how much. It's a little bit. And we estimated it at?
This much.
Oh.
Can you see that through there?
He wanted a measurement. I wouldn't give him one.
Not closer to
Oh,
the
steady.
screen.
I can't see no screen.
The thickness of an old groat. Is that an old groat up in the back row?
Moxon talks about shillings, but and I actually was going to bring one. It's home somewhere, 17th century shilling.
There we go.
Got it?
You guys see that?
You see, that's not a pure circle. It's a cord has been cut off, and we can tell you this: that if your offset obscures the hole too much, you can go with your awl and prick out the offending portion. Why not? Okay? On the other hand, if your offset meets perfectly, what are you going to do? Aha! Very simply, you take a bigger piercer, pierce the holes through the stile, and use a bigger peg. Because you didn't go through the tenon, you say. So you've moved the hole out, but left the tenon hole where it was, and again, now you've got a new interference with a larger peg. I don't know, I've never seen that, but I can tell you it works because I've done it, and I think you've done it too, haven't you, Peter?
What's even worse is when you you move those holes in the wrong direction,
Oh,
and you've got 40 people watching you, and you're driving the pegs in, and it's spreading your joint apart. That's the time to crawl under your bench.
Peter, what's the trick to getting a really accurate location of the hole with that bit?
Well, mine has a point on it, and that is the trick.
and that's cowardice.
That's cowardice, says Uncle John.
What you do
You
with
can wiggle it back and forth, the ones without the...
the semicircular, you take your brace and you
wiggle
go
it.
this way, and you start digging, and then you do the whole circle. That's how you get it started. And
Now, as you know from what we've been saying this morning, there's lots of leeway in this stuff. And if your hole isn't quite ready, you can lean this way and that and bring them around. I'm going to just bevel the ends of these tenons while I've got them out here.
that's so the tenon will force, I call it the frass at the bottom of the mortise, to each side. That it won't go down flat and compress it, because at a certain point with the moisture in that messy shavings, it won't compress anymore. So it could just totally oppose the draw boring. And you want to avoid any opposition to this draw boring at any expense.
All right, now? Okay, so now you pop that right back in there, and the holes will hopefully do what we're going to do. I am going to set the other frame on top of these, and we'll put metal pins in to test fit that apron right there, and we'll show you why.
Oh, but
Yes,
Peter, you're missing a stretcher. What's that about? How can you, hey Peter, look, I know you're in public, I know you're excited and very pleased to be here, but to avoid putting a stretcher in is outrageous. I mean, the evenings I spent with this boy. It's outrageous, Peter. What, you want to apologize now? Hang
Nah.
your head?
Nah, forget it.
Listen to him. Truculent.
So these are John's alignment pins. It's the only tool he buys from Sears now. And they're just a tapered machinist pin.
Machinist alignment pin.
That he puts these cute octagonal handles on. And I love them. I got a whole set of them.
Yeah, and I
used to
give
have
a
this
set
great-
to my ex-friend Peter Follinsby, who's left a stretcher out.
I used to have this great mailbox that got all kinds of things from Light Street in Baltimore. So what I have done, can you get that from, or do you want me to move it? Do you want to come up and
God,
look
these
down?
pictures are incredible. Just
You're all the
incredible.
way up? What I have done is driven those pins into the offset holes, and they're tapered pins, and they have snugged up the joint on these shoulders to make it tight.
Look how that knife edge is just clinging against that style.
And that is going to give me the length of the shoulder to shoulder for that stretcher on that side.
You mean you weren't mistaken?
Nah. I learned this from the little master. Trained at the foot of the master.
Stinky foot.
Yeah, well, I can get that close. So now, again, you don't do it by measurement, but just by scribing it. And
That is a classic example of a resulting dimension, that you never know what it is, but it results from other dimensions you've laid out. A very important consequence. The true amateur here will want a measurement for everything. He says, oh, it's this high at the beginning and this long at the bottom. Do that right. You've got your angle. You know where you're going. Lay the piece, nick it off, and never measure it. No need to. And watch, it's going to fit.
it's going to fit in a minute. Now I got to cut another tenon. But to give you a chance to talk amongst yourselves again.
It gives me a chance to talk.
Yeah, great. So just using, once I've pricked that length of that shoulder to shoulder, then I just used the bevel gauge to establish that angle on there. And now I'll just mark out and cut that tenon. I'll try to be quick so we can get this stool together.
My only regret is that I'm not able to look at the screen. If I keep turning back and forth, I literally get dizzy. But these pictures, thanks to the staff here, are simply, I'm sure you people, many of you have been here before. I've never seen this. And I've demonstrated many places, Peter has, we've demonstrated many places together, but never in a setup like this. The only complaint that I have so far, and I'm going to keep an open mind about complaints, right, Peter? is that they swept all the shavings up. I mean that, seriously, it was stupid. Huh? Pardon me? Oh, bug liability? We wouldn't bring bugs. But Peter, under pressure like this, gives you a very good sense of the pressure that a joiner was under. If you look at the inventories The most valuable thing in the inventory are fabrics, because that is all labor intensive. The next important item is the cow, or cattle, kine. It's incredible. The cows are as valuable, or maybe more valuable than the fabrics. That's really wild. And you get down, and you get down, and you get down, and it says, stool. Nothing. Nothing. Table. Nothing. Cupboard. A little more. It's amazing. One thing that's interesting about New England was that at least in many of the outlying areas, that the joiner was also a yeoman in the sense that he owned some property and at least had a garden. And you'll see that in the joiner's inventory will be the ordinary gardening tools, basic farm equipment, equipment to handle foodstuffs, sometimes equipment to make fabrics even. That's going a little far. So in a way, though this wouldn't be true particularly in London, you have a different kind of life, of an economic setting, where the guy is, we sometimes wonder if he didn't have the apprentice to go milk the cows, to cut the hay. Because there are a lot of lawsuits, by the way, where the apprentice is suing because the master didn't teach him anything. He's been there 4 years or something, he hadn't learned to cut a joint yet. But it's a different kind of culture. For example, I'm somewhat familiar with the Tidewater culture in Maryland. I've read, some of the archives and the inventories and so on. It's a completely different world.
It's always the last place you look.
It's a completely different world. The crop, the cash crop. In St. Mary's City, a joiner came from England, and he got his 50 acres for himself, 50 acres for his wife, 50 acres for a manservant, all the usual kind of things you got, I'm saying, oh my gracious, and he was called, so-and-so, the joiner. Oh, it was my little heartbeat, just go find it. I found his inventory. It had a wide hoe, a narrow hoe. It had so many pounds of tobacco. That sucker had thrown his tools away. There was just no reason for him to join in that cash economy. He'd been stupid. And that may be one of the reasons why in the Tidewater we don't have the massive amount of joinery that you find in New England. On the other hand, you find among the higher class of folk in Tidewater, if you look at some of their inventories, it's the same kind of stuff or even better than you would find in New England. Because, of course, most of it was imported. For example, St. Mary's City, there was Odersey, I forget his name, who was a merchant, and he actually had stock of joined furniture, which was clearly imported. It wasn't made here. Whereas in New England, you don't find, I don't believe, any evidence of imported furniture. It was too large, it was too bulky. You want to make some money, put a cow there instead of 4 cupboards. You can make some money off a cow. And of course the Englishman, his question always is, where's the beef? It was very literally true then. And so when I laugh at all the fast food places today, I've got to realize that my ancestors, they were hooked in the same stuff. Now maybe they didn't get it covered with cheese and pepperoni and all that good stuff, but you can't have everything at once. Peter, are you done?
What am I doing? I'm doing what we were hired to do. I'm building a stool.
Yeah, I want to know if you're done. I don't care what you're doing. I want success. I want a result.
I've been hoping I could finish before you were done.
Because, for me to
So you
stand up
wouldn't
here and
notice.
fill the air with sound, well, you've heard me do that before, I'm sure. So at any rate, folks, while I was just bullcrapping, Peter has measured a style, gotten the resulting dimension, taken a rough tenoned it. It's incredible. How
Now-
long did it take?
Now, the other day, John's most recent victim, Nathaniel, made me these pegs. And they're split and shaved out of oak. I'll show you how I shave one, and then we'll use Nathaniel's and drive this thing together. 2, 3, 4. Where'd the peg stuck? John, can you grab me a peg under that bench in that cardboard box? Like behind the velvet stool. Right in front of you.
Give again, please.
Right in front of you, velvet stool.
The
Go
velvet
forward.
stool?
Yeah, there's a box under there with some
That's
peg
not
stuff.
velvet. It's linen.
Sure is flashy. Thank you. So this is a section of oak that I've just split off. I save short offcuts of straight-grained oak and split them to this, which is, I don't know how big a cross-section. It's about like that, like
It's
that.
big enough.
It's big enough. And then I take the biggest chisel I own to make the littlest piece of wood in the stool. And taper them in the square. And come back this way a little bit, clean them up some. And then knock the corners off a bit so it's somewhat octagonal. And these pegs need to be the driest piece of wood in the room. If these have moisture in them at the assembly, they can then shrink as they lose that moisture, and that isn't a good thing. So these want to be dry.
So you see, we've now determined, I believe, 5 or 6 states of workability moisture content. And though I am an informed amateur and a picky oogie googie, I have never put a moisture meter on these elements because they didn't have moisture meters, and it's clear after you have experience with these different workable moistures for different purposes that you can test for each one of them.
So you take the tapered end of the peg and set it in the hole and drive it. You can test fit this with your metal pins and then take them out one by one and drive them. And this is like the other wisecrack. You want to drive this peg until right before the stile splits.
That's workability.
And but all you really need to do is have it come through the... Can you get into here? Mm-hmm. You see it exiting inside the stool there.
Oh, cryob.
Can you get that right there? Yeah.
It's,
Yep. And
Do you ever use any wood besides oak for your pegs?
no,
oh, but there is an exception. We have found hickory used.
once in a chest nobody knew anything about. Nobody could figure out that chest. But no. Nathaniel, those pegs are fine.
Nathaniel learned his technique yesterday afternoon.
Did well.
Nathaniel's an excellent learner. Where are you, Nathaniel? Well, raise your hand or something. Where? Nathaniel's the young man with the bowler hat. Put your bowler hat on, Nathaniel. Very good. And if you want to know anything that I know, ask Nathaniel. You know.
Then you saw off, not flush with the stool, because you don't want to scar up the stool. And then go in with the chisel upside down, bevel down. And come from each side. A little bit here, don't go all the way through it. Come from the other way. That way, when you tear it out, it's not going to splinter as much. And then flip the chisel over and pare that down flush with the stool so that later Alexander will come by when the stool has lived a while.
And feel the surface. If you're very good, and Peter gets his act together, we may show you some slides which establish the fact, beyond a doubt, that 17th century joinery was made out of wood, was assembled out of wood with moisture, substantial moisture. You've seen it rived, that's easy, it's wet and green, but maybe it dried,
So
maybe they
I'm
put
just
it up
gonna
in
keep pegging
the
those.
shed
It
or
gets
something.
pretty redundant.
You're going to find that these pegs in
Yeah,
time
we're doing fine.
will project. They won't project. What will
After
happen
this,
is
there's only
the
one
style will
operation to
shrink,
put-
meaning that the style had moisture. You see, the peg, the length of the peg does not change with moisture content. Wood moves along the long fibers a fraction of a percent upon drying. But wood across the growth rings or across the rays, it shrinks, and you can't stop it. So what happens is the style will shrink down the peg, and you will see that the peg, which was schnicked off perfectly true to the surface, like Peter's just shown you, is now projecting. And that means that at the time the stool was assembled, the style still contained substantial moisture content. It's absolutely amazing. And if you look at the Wallace nutting chair, which isn't here right now, but maybe we can dig it up sometime, and you look at the pegs in it, you will see that just a tiny little dimple above the surface, because Wallace was working with kiln-dry wood. Not Wallace himself, but his workmen. And that is ultimately the determining factor, such that I can take a stool like this, I can feel they aren't projecting there, but they're projecting there. This is a bad one too. Glad I picked the wrong stool. And I can feel that the pegs are projecting 2 times much in one direction as in the other. Why? Because these styles, you see, have ray planes running this way and growths this way, and the growths shrink more, so they'll stick out more on the front than they will on the side. And I can do a double blindfold test and tell you how the grain's running. I can also tell you these styles were moist at the time of assembly. Not just fabrication, but actually when the thing was driven together. Here's a good set. And you can come up and look at these later. Okay, this one under my left thumb here is sticking out a 1/16 of an inch plus. Over here, it's sticking out, well, way less than a 1/16. That means the ray plane was this way, stable, didn't shrink as much. The growth ring plane was this way, unstable, shrank more. And that is one of the ultimate tests, if somebody's trying to sell you a piece of 17th century furniture, is to examine the pegs very carefully, any turnings, make sure they're egg-shaped, right? Look inside, and if it looks like a cat doo-dooed in a knitting basket, that's about probably be 17th century work. You can look at the bottoms of the feet, and you can see, here are the growth rings, here are the rays. Same thing, all lined up, perfectly symmetrical. Those are indications of 17th century work.
Talk about the seat.
Eek! That's home invasion.
Oh, John,
Yes.
what about repeated, over the years, exposure to moisture?
The change in moisture? I'm glad you asked that question. Because Alexander, the informed amateur, has a theory, which of course follows me, you know.
I do have a theory for 35 seconds.
Okay, the theory is that when you reach under this peg top, you can put your finger in there, it's become riveted. Because what has happened is, as with moisture change, the wood now has raised up and down the peg, and it's flattened the bottom of this domed peg. And so if you look at pegs, you're not going to be allowed to do that on that furniture, but you look over here, you can feel under this peg, and you can feel like it's flat under the head. So it's domed like that. Because you see these pegs were under tremendous pressure when they were driven in. All the fibers were very straight like this. Here is the flat surface of the wood. But as the wood receded, these fibers proceeded to balloon, you see, to relieve the incoming pressure. Then, as the chest with moisture change annually, biannually, whatever, came up and down, it pushed the bottom of the peg flat. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My dog Fowler thank you.
It's time to do the seat. If you want to look at your slides, we got to put the seat on the stool.
All right, this is a seat. Okay, the seat is the one true board that we have, among the true boards that we have in joinery, which is to say, it's both sides are flat and parallel to each other, okay? This is totally outrageous. This is a nice piece of oak, and Peter has made this molding here, first by rabbiting a little rabbet around it, and then with a smooth plane, simply guesstimating this quarter of an ellipse, I guess we'd call it, okay?
Why not?
Okay, now comes the question, how are you going to get this darn thing on the stool? There are a lot of ways to do it. That this is the most common way, and it's the worst way. It is.
And the method by which we'll do it, I have never done before.
Right, invented by, guess who? The informed amateur at your service.
I've drilled a few pilot holes with a small bit in my brace for iron nails that will temporarily fix this to the stool while I bore the hole for the square wooden peg that's going to fasten it in place. The splay of the short ends of the stool is the angle at which the pins, the pegs, will go. If they go in straight like that, you can pick the stool up by its seat and you'll walk away with the seat. But if they're in this way and the other one going that way, they sort of pinch it on there. That's the theory anyway. And, whoops.
I'm getting bleary with theory. You didn't like that, did you?
So, see if this is going to do it. If it doesn't, it's been a lot of fun. We've enjoyed being with you this morning.
My dog Fallow thanks you.
So you won't get the split in the top with weather change, with fixing it at four corners on it yet.
I haven't had them split. It's a perfectly quartered piece of wood. Most of its shrinkage is going to be in its thickness, not in its width. So here I've got just a larger bit. And to position this, I didn't measure, surprise, the overhang on the stool. And in fact, I've got it kind of crazy. It's a little bit too far to me right now because I set it up this morning and then I didn't check it just now. But that's okay. I don't want to move it. It's on
Why
there.
not? Go on, we got time, Peter. Go ahead.
Well,
What happened, you know what happened. If you did it 180, you're probably going to line up. Where's your pinchers?
uh,
Come on, honey, let's do it right. Get the pinchers.
they're over here
All
somewhere.
right, and give me that tendon cheek there. See the tendon waist cheek, right? Yeah.
This?
No, right there. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Your examination of actual 17th century American pieces, the tops of stools, the ones that are in existence, are usually oak, or are they pine, or are they various woods?
Peter, you want to do that one?
They should be oak. The original ones are oak.
We think. I mean, pretty certainly. And there are a lot of them that are...
I know it.
Okay. And there are a lot of them that are now pine for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and there's a joined form at Winterthur that the top, a joined form is a 4-foot long joint stool. And that one at Winterthur has a pine seat. And I don't know if that's replaced or not.
I suspect it's a replacement, Peter.
But
It looks like-
you don't know what it replaces.
Well, it looks like barn siding to me.
So in that period, that
It's still fit well.
sawn, or was it rye? Well, it was rye, I guess, and then it was rye, correct? The whole
The top of this stool? Yeah, that's split out of a big log. This is 10 and 10.5 inches wide, which means the log is 2.5 feet
At least.
in diameter.
Because by the time you take the bark, the sapwood, and the juvenile wood off, and remember, you're only dealing with half the distance of the log, the radius. So you've got a 36-inch log. Okay, that means each side, in theory, is 18. Bark, sapwood, depends on how bad the juvenile wood is, are you going to get 10.5 out of it? It's a close call.
This is
Two spucks per...
And when you're boring into the end grain of the stile, you have to pull that back out to get that stuff out of there.
To get some of it out. Because
get
what
some.
happens is that fresh, a lot of it will get knocked down in the bottom of the hole. So you put it all in there and you think you've got 2.5 inches. You put the peg in there and drive all the goop down to the bottom and you get a compression fit, you know, you may have 1 3/4 inches. And I've actually split them, the informed amateur has split them open and you'll see this pack, this massive pack of these little shavings down the bottom, and they're unmovable. You can't compress them. And once they're down there, you can't get them out. Maybe a twist drill would help. And by the way, I want to say this in fairness to myself and Peter. We don't use any Mickey Mouse modern tools. I said twist drill. We really don't do that. Because to have some appreciation of what these people were, how they lived, the problems they faced, the economy, the wood supplies, wood fabrication, wood transportation, blah, 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 all these things, if you want to learn, do it their way. And we don't have much truck, and I got to say this quite frankly, with people who use power tools, with people who process their wood with saws, band saws, people that use power lathes,
Okay.
don't work so good. Oh, pardon me, Peter.
These pegs hardly taper at all.
And their cross section?
They're square. And this seat still has crept a little. It's in a funny place. I might not drive all 4 pegs. But you see the angle at which that goes in there. And then this one will oppose it.
Peter, did you orient the grain in the peg
No.
consonantly with the grain in the top?